Good morning, you join us on a beautiful Sunday morning, and we're out by the Johnny and the combine today because today we need to get some work done. We need to fit the GPS system and make sure that's working, fit the new batteries, and then we need to go out the paddock, get those gates fitted. Hey everyone, my name is Noah and you're watching TJM Farming here on YouTube. We are a Western Australian sheep farm on the banks of the Moore River, and this channel is all about showing you the realities of trying to run a semi-parkland cleared mixed wheat and sheep farm in Western Australia. Now, I do have some previous footage from the past couple of weeks, so while we get the Autosteer trying to work, we'll pass you on to previous Noah and he can talk a little bit about this machine right here when we got it delivered. Roll the tape. Indy Sue wants in. I'm telling her if she's going to be a tractor dog this year, then she needs to play by my rules and jump in the cab herself. Welcome to Good Friday, everyone. As you know, seeding time is a very key part when it comes to agriculture all across the world. Right now, the planters are rolling in North America, South America, Europe, Asia, and in Australia. Seeding time for our farm is rapidly approaching. For those who have fairly recently joined us, thanks to the past couple of videos starring that certain Big Blue tractor, you would know that we sold Big Blue fairly recently, but we're still planning to put a crop in. 80 hectares of wheat and roughly about 7 hectares of oats in the two paddocks just behind me. In Western Australia, more often than not, you will find not a complete unit seed drill like they've got in the United States or over in Europe. What you would actually find are mostly two types of seeder. The first type, well, you can see an example of that, is an air cart. That's what we call a tow between, where the tank is in between the tractor and the air seeder bar. Then you've got something like this, a big old Gason air cart with a John Deere bar in front of it. This is what you call a typical air seeder with a tow behind tank. As you can see, it's behind the bar. Well, you have seen us use this setup once before. We don't have a big enough tractor to pull it because, well, Big Blue's gone. So what are we going to be using for seeding this year? The answer lies out the paddock. Let's jump in the Kubota. Let's go up to Little Bore and let's go have a look. I've been talking on and on and on about how when the day that Big Blue would be sold and the air seeder would be sold, we'd be getting something a little bit smaller to shoot the size of Erinvale without getting stuck, without running through a bunch of black boys, and something that can get in between the trees. And in previous discussions I did mention that we bought a Chamberlain 753. Now, what is a Chamberlain 753? You ready for the big reveal? This is our new, to us, seeder. First of all, let me just give you a brief explanation what exactly this piece of machinery is. What you see behind me is the final evolution of a Western Australian invention that was the Chamberlain combine. On initial inspection, you may say, but Noah, isn't this a John Deere? It's painted green and yellow, but it says Chamberlain on the side. Well, there's a very good reason for that. In the ye old days when my grandfather was young, he would have been around my age when these things started coming out, modern Western Australian agriculture was just getting off its feet. This was just the start of the post-war era where soldiers coming back from the front lines in World War II were given blocks of farmland by the state government to clear and to make productive to grow food for the ever-growing population of Western Australia. Part of that program to build what would become the farming communities across the wheat belt in Western Australia was the birth of Chamberlain. Now, Chamberlain actually started out making tractors originally. The 40K was revolutionary for its time because it was one of the first tractors to be built from scratch with only materials sourced, produced and made in WA. And from the birth of the 40K, well, obviously you had a tractor, you needed something for it to pull. That's where you get things like a disc plough, like the John Shearer disc plough that we've got sitting back in the farmyard, and combines like this. Combines are a purely mechanical masterpiece where the only hydraulics that hook up to the tractor are purely there to raise and lower this entire machine. The rest is all driven through the use of these wheels. The very early combines, you could simply just whack some seed and fertilizer into the bin and pop it into the ground and off you go. No gearbox really needed, although the early ones did have a gearbox. People overseas would know combines for the term combine harvester. Well, in Australia, we call combine harvesters headers. And that would confuse some people, but it's very self-explanatory when you realise that the first modern day combine harvesters were actually sunshine harvesters invented in the land down under. And we called harvesters headers, simply for the reason that in most parts of Australia, we only grow cereal grain crops. So your wheat, barley, oats, canola, white lupins, etc., so on and so forth. You wouldn't find any row crops like corn and the modern day soybean that they grow in places like Iowa, Minnesota, places like that in the United States. You won't find any of that in Western Australia because it's a different part of the world, different climate, and completely different conditions for what crops we can and cannot grow. So combine harvesters would be called headers down under, and the fronts of these headers were sometimes called combs, sometimes called sickles, sometimes simply called draper fronts. But when I was growing up, I always heard Pop use the term header comb. And the reason for that was because the Massey Ferguson 587 header that we had sitting in our workshop, it had what is called a stripper front. The strippers were the very, very early design of header fronts where they'd simply strip the grain off the top of the crop and they'd leave all of the stubble behind. It's a bit difficult for me to explain it. I'll leave Jeffrey from Brookdale Farm to explain it because he's done a whole lot of very, very good videos talking about the early machinery that West Australian farmers used. So I'll leave a link down below and you can go check that out. Early headers, we didn't have any corn or sunflowers growing in Western Australia. So the headers only really took in one type of grain at a time. So you couldn't really combine things now, could you? Compare that to a combine seeder, like the 753 here. Let's take all of the straps off and you can see what I mean. Let's open it up like so, if I can get it to lock. Yeah, now the 753 shares a bin design with the Mark III, Mark II and Mark I Chamberlain combines, by which it has two compartments inside the bin under this latch here. This is the seed compartment and you flip it over here and suddenly you got room for your fertilizer. In the 1950s and 60s, this was revolutionary because before any of this, any grain drills and stuff that you'd find in WA before modern day combines like this, it was very hard to find anyone that would put fertilizer in at the same time as seed, because superphosphate at the time in the 1950s and 60s, it was all subsidized by the government in order to try and help the farmers find ways of growing their crops better. So basically how it works is you put seed in here, you put fertilizer in there, you close the cover, and then you jump down to the other side and you set your gears. And I think there's a lever you've got to pull. It basically activates the gearbox where the wheels, when they start to move, it starts the seed flowing. And that's how you end up with seeds flowing, being propelled by the combine without any extra hydraulic ram needed from the tractor or PTO horsepower or anything like that. The only horsepower you really need to power one of these things is how much grip the tractor has at the front. And all you need is some hydraulics to raise and lower this. And apart from that, you're set. Of course, you may have noticed already by now that the combine's in bits. And there's a very good reason for that. Mr. Nelson, who we bought this off, he didn't have a shed to put this under. So he did something that most farmers don't actually do. At the end of every season that he used this, he'd pull all of the key components that are the most expensive parts of this combine, like your seeder boots, your tines, your meter rollers, etc. He'd all keep them in a little garden shed in boxes under cover to stop them rusting and needing to buy new parts every couple of years. That is the reason why this is in bits at the moment, but it's like a giant puzzle piece. All you really need to do is put it together. Now, our 753 was built right at the point where deerification occurred. Chamberlain Tractors, or Chamberlain Industries as it was known in Western Australia, all of its equipment was built in a factory in Welshpool, Western Australia, which is now currently a pretty busy suburb of Perth. All of their machinery was built in that Welshpool factory, but the original brand couldn't exactly survive on its own. So in about 1969, 1970, well, a certain leaping green and yellow American deer comes knocking on Chamberlain's doorstep asking, "Can we buy you out?" Obviously Chamberlain said, no, but you can buy shares to help invest in us, to keep us going for a while if you'd like. Well, this is the point in history where people would say that this is either the best move Chamberlain ever made or it's the worst decision they made, because when John Deere first started buying shares in Chamberlain in 1969, 1970, out from Welshpool in the 1970s and the 1980s came your C670s, C6100s, which were fantastic tractors, and you started having the Mark II and Mark III combines, as well as plows, discs, cultivators, the works. But they weren't painted Chamberlain orange. Chamberlain actually had a yellow, very suspiciously similar to John Deere's construction fleets they had at that time. Suddenly you get to the 1980s, and well, the farming industry over in America, just like in Australia, was having a rough run in the 1980s. You had a lot of hit and miss years during that decade, and a lot of farmers over in the US went bust one way or another, while others struggled to keep going. This is how you ended up with things like Case and International Harvester merging into one in around 1985. Well, at the turn of 1982, 1983, this was around the time when the 4000 series Chamberlain came around, and John Deere was basically asking Chamberlain for more and more and more of their income, and Waterloo was having more of a say of what went on in Welshpool. It got to the point where around 1984, 1985, John Deere decided that, right, well, we're going to pull the plug on the Chamberlain Yellow. We'll start phasing out Chamberlain. Phasing out. Yeah, that's specific use of terminology, but that's exactly what happened. 1984, 1985 saw the transition from yellow combines to this, the Chamberlain 753. These were the very last combines that Chamberlain would ever make before John Deere finally pulled the plug and the last Chamberlain machines rolled out of Welshpool in 1986. The 753s were one of the very last Chamberlain designs that would be produced. All right, history lesson over. Now, what does this Chamberlain combine have for this particular model? Well, the 753s, you could have multiple different configurations on it. Multiple different 753s we actually looked at before this one Some of them had harrows. Jacko's combine that they have, theirs has press wheels, pretty similar to the ones we've got on here. But the thing that puts our combine different to pretty much most of the other 753s on the market was the fact that this one's been used fairly recently, so we know it's in good condition, and it's got this. These combines are known for having seed flow issues when it comes to tricky crops like oats, especially sire oats, which is a hay variety. They never really flowed too well, according to Dad and other farmers that I've spoken to about these. That's where this comes in. This is apparently called Fan Assist. The Fan Assist is there to basically be like a mini air seeder.
Oh shit, yeah. Okay, yeah. The screen has frozen. Oh no.
Now, some people may point out that this is a John Deere 7810. Most John Deeres generally, especially in Farming Simulator, generally are fitted with Green Star, which is John Deere's own Autosteer or GPS system. This 7810 is not fitted with Green Star. It's actually been fitted with Trimble for the majority of the time that it's had Autosteer fitted. The reason for this is because Green Star is expensive. And also, you may remember seeing when I've talked about Big Blue in past videos, that had a FM 750 Trimble Autosteer in it as well. Although that was a case screen, this one's got a New Holland screen. So we generally just got Trimble because it's cheaper, works a bit better, and well, Big Blue had one just like the Johnny has, just different colours. So it standardised a bit and we knew how to use it, and we didn't have to reteach ourselves every single year how to use different ones. But like all technology, Autosteer systems, they're like iPads at some points. They all need firmware upgrades as technology gets newer. Unfortunately, the FM 750, which we got in this tractor, they are not being made anymore, which is frustrating because when we need software updates, it's not like iPads or phones or any of the other tech gadgets that you normally have in your household, where you can simply just connect it to the internet and then press software update button. Actually, it's a little bit more complicated than that. Having Autosteer on a tractor like this one is good because we're combining older gear with modern technology. That's how farms like ours evolve and move with newer technologies. When it comes to things like the combine and the John Shearer plough behind the tree there, we're planning to use that plough or that chisel over there, one of the two, whichever we can get going easier. We'll be using one of those two for working up, and we'll be putting seed in the ground with the 753 there. These don't need Autosteer, but the thing that really needs the Autosteer to function correctly, well, it's our most expensive piece of machinery we still have on the farm. Back to 2021 when I did my first voiced real life video with this GoPro. That was when we bought this, the Gold Acres Prairie Pro 5028, which we bought brand new on finance from Gold Acres. They built it for us. We had the sprayer shipped from over east to our farm in 2021. It's actually a 2020 model. We ordered it in October, I think. It's a 28 metre boom. It's a 5,000 litre tank. Overall, it's a solid machine. It's Australian built and it's been fantastic. We haven't used it at all last year because we haven't had anything to spray. But now that we're going to be putting a crop in this year, and we're also planning some other projects that may require this as well down the track, we really need the Autosteer to work, because when it comes to spraying, it's very important that you need to have your lines straight. This is where things like tram lines and making sure that you're working width and section control and all that jazz is working properly. You may have seen that Giant Software have announced Precision Farming 3.0 fairly recently, where they mentioned Trimble section control with sprayers that are not green and yellow. Well, that's exactly the same case for this piece of machinery right here. We'll use Hardy as an example here as well. This is the sprayer that came before the Gold Acres. Hardy also at one point had foam markers on the edge of the boom here. They're not here as of present, but I do believe it's this bracket right here. There used to be some kind of bucket thing, and you'd fill it up with foam and it would spray the edge of your markers so that whether you had auto steer or not, you could still figure out where you were going. Without any foam markers, you don't know where the edge of your last pass with the sprayer is. That's where things like the auto steer are very, very, very important. It's very important to get that right, because if you're going over the same run twice without knowing, well, you can overspray or you can underspray and stuff goes wrong. With sprayers, it's very important that you have an auto steer system in place so you know exactly where you're going, exactly how much you're applying, be it pre-emerge, post-emerge, chemicals or liquid fertilizer. It's important to get that application level right. Because we've only got one tractor big enough to pull all these pieces of equipment on the farm, yeah, we really need to make sure this auto steer is working. Oh. Right, so I got the new batteries fitted to the Johnny. The Johnny starts, but the FM 750 does not. So, what does this mean? Well, we tried to do a hard reset on the monitor about 3 times over, and it wouldn't let us use the touch screen part of it. It tried to get us to use Screeching Bald Eagle Imperial units, but we just couldn't get the screen to work. So for now, we're just gonna have to figure out a way of either sending the screen off, or maybe this is a good point to upgrade that screen. The trouble is we don't know a price. In other news, now that we got the new batteries fitted to the Johnny, we worked out that in the past 3 years, this Johnny has only done about 342 hours since it was last serviced. That basically means that we could get another 150 hours for this entire year out of this tractor. But when we did pull the dipstick out, it did show the oil was pretty black, and I did say to Dad that perhaps it might be a wise idea to do a service now. That way it's out of the way, we don't need to worry about it next year. Get it done, out of the way, and make sure that it's good to go. If thinking with that tractor taking about 26 litres of engine oil is correct, if we need to get an extra 6 litres and maybe another oil drum, that means we can also do an oil change and service on Little Red Tractor here. Because as you know, as I stated in previous videos, Little Red is well overdue for a service as well. For now, well, there's nothing really much we can do about the Johnny at the moment. As for the combine, well, you've been given the context about the combine already. We measured it, it's 6.88 meters wide wheel to wheel, and from the middle of this press wheel all the way to the middle of this press wheel, it's sitting about 5.6 meters wide in an actual working width. And the reason why we measure from the center of the press wheels is because these are basically marking out our rows. What we really need to do with the combine is basically get all the meters and stuff set up so that we can actually have seed in the bin here, run down through the hoses, and then onto the cedar boots, which are going to be bolted to these tines here. This the very first seed boot that we put on this as an example, it's going to flow down along this tube right here, down into this right here. Basically, this is the tine, this is the actual point, and these brackets hold on the cedar boot here to the tine itself with all these brackets. And then with the fan assist up there spinning and the seed actually flowing from that hose up in the tank there. It runs along the bar and then comes down to here, which is called the seed chute boot. Dad might need to come correct me on some of this. I'll give this all a recap when we actually get out in the paddock in a couple of weeks time, but basicly the tine point opens up the ground, the seed flows through that tube there, and it runs along through the row there, and the press wheels are there to close the row and to help compact the soil so that the seed has contact with the soil and it helps it germinate. The reason why there's only one seed boot actually connected in this entire thing, I think there's about 28 of them. The reason why there's only one example one here is because we need to try and fit a liquid kit to this. Now, what does a liquid kit entail? Behind us, over near the sprayer and behind the wreck, that's the Chamberlain, is the tractor exhaust tanks. While we're not using the tractor exhaust system for our cropping program this year, those tanks will be valuable to us as they'll be used as liquid tanks. They'll be able to balance out the liquid fertilizer system that we want to be putting and applying in the ground at the same time as the seed. Now, this whole combine here, basically this is what we call a single chute system. The reason why it's called a single chute is because this tube here is initially for the seed and also for granular fertilizer. Granular fertilizer requires a super shed. Now, you only need to go back to the old Nelly Creek videos. We'll throw up some archive footage if I have time. Basically, the super shed, the reason why we called it the super shed, when we were young, myself and my older sister thought that the super shed was super because it was big. When in actual fact, the reason why it was called the super shed is because it was built for machinery and solid fertilizer storage, granular. Now, Erindale only has one shed, and that one shed can only act as a workshop, machinery shed, and a shearing shed, but it doesn't have any fertilizer storage. So, because we can only get granular fertilizer in bulk, and our silos are not designed to hold granular fertilizer, we need to go liquid. So the plan is, much like our air seeder that I've shown earlier on in this video, that air seeder is fitted with what we call a liquid kit. Basically, the air cart has a big old liquid fertilizer tank, and it's got hoses that run along the John Deere bar, and it has another boot behind the seed on this tine setup that basically allows us to run liquid fertilizer as well. That's what we called a double chute system. This is what the Pat McMurray bar had up on Nelly Creek as well, because we designed that to run liquid as well. This is a single chute system, so what we really need to do is figure out a way to put a liquid kit on it. The end game for setting up a liquid kit on this combine is going to be, we'll take the tractor exhaust tanks, strap them onto the bar with some kind of welding bracket thing, and basically just have it as one permanent unit, taking out the boiling pot and whatnot and just having the tanks run liquid fertilizer. But this year we are on a time crunch because Dad is working at Chilara trying to get their air seeder ready to go at the same time as he's trying to help me put the crop in here. So Dad is stretched as to what he can do, and I haven't welded anything in the past 3 years, so I'm a bit of an amateur when it comes to this whole thing, and welding stuff, a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of cost and materials. Now, originally we had those tractor exhaust tanks specifically fitted so they could go on the front here. What is this bracket on the front here? Basically, John Deere designed these tractors to have a weight bracket fitted on the front. That's exactly what this is. It's designed so that if the farmer wants a rock bucket on the front, for example, if the farmer wanted to pick rocks out in the paddock while he was planting or spraying, for example, he could buy an extra attachment and bolt it to the front here. If he wanted to put some extra weight on the front of the tractor to help it get more traction and more weight on the front, if it had something heavy on the back, like a 3-point fertilizer spread, for example, he'd also get an additional weight bracket to this and get these, what they call sack weights. They whack them onto the brackets and stuff like that. You may have seen Millennial Farmer use that for some of his other John Deere tractors. The same applies to the 7810 here. Because we're short of time and funds to really get the materials needed to weld some sort of contraption onto here to strap the tractor exhaust tanks onto the bar here, what we're going to try and do instead, we're still going to run with the liquid idea, but the idea is we either weld a second chute behind the cedar boot here. Here's a separate one for an example. This is the cedar boot itself and the bracket that holds it onto the tine here. Basically, you unbolt it and stick it here, and then you run the bolt, making sure that the cedar boot and the bracket here are lined up with the tine. That bolt hole right there is supposed to go through this same bolt hole right here. So, one of two ideas. Idea one is that we weld a second chute on and we have the liquid fertilizer running directly after the seed, and it applies liquid fertilizer on top of the seed before it gets pressed into the ground by the press wheels. Or option number two, we run a hose through here and then we weld this gap along here and this gap along here together, and then we use the pedestal drill to line it up with the seed boot gap and then drill a hole right through there, large enough for us to run a hose through. We've also got option number three, which I call the Bogan method, which is bugger the idea of welding stuff together. Let's just have the liquid hoses zip tied to the seed hose here, and just zip tie there, zip tie there, zip tie there, all the way along, and then just have the hoses directly behind the cedar boot there. But the reason why the Bogan method isn't gonna work, and it's just a funny idea, is really because zip ties, they can only go so far before you have a kink in the hose pipe. And ideally, we want something that will last for years and years to come, because ideally we want something that's cost effective and that doesn't cost an arm and a leg to redo every single bloody year. And then around this side as well, we need to put the cogs and the chains onto this system here, because this is the drive system that is controlled by this gearbox as well, which dictates your speed that you want for your seed and fertilizer to go. Because you got low, medium, high, A, B, C, D, and E, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you got your seeding rates specifically for peas or lupins, wheat, barley, oats, rice, sunflower, sorghum, clover, linseed, rape, and granulated fertilizer, etc. And it's got all these instructions up here for you. That's basically the situation with this. Next phase of the plan. Dad and I have been out the paddock in the gateway between Boggy Ute paddock and Middle paddock. We got the new double swing gates all set up. One of them's been done, it's all ready to go, and Dad's going out to the second double swing gate that we're making, and that is going to be done as well. I'm in the loader, not to take hay bales out, but we need to go swap over to the bucket with the teeth, because the weed rope at that first gateway, that needs to be skimmed off the top, otherwise the gateway won't shut properly. So here we are at the first gate. We've got that new swing gate, that's the addition. This one's the original gate. You can see that we knocked over the cattle grid. I haven't got a chain on the bucket because we need to remove that wooden fence post we're driving past now. So what I might do is I'll just go join Dad at the second gate, lend him a hand, and see if we can do the second gate, get that all set up, and then we'll come back and smooth out that gateway at the first gate. Righto, so we're at the gates that busted open a couple of videos back, and as you can see, we've removed the cattle stop motorbike thingy. I don't know the proper terminology for this because I'm sheep, not cattle. We've got this swing gate here, and we've added that swing gate there. what we need to do now, remove this strainer post and all the wire and stuff that's surrounding it, so that we can shut that gate, shut this gate, and see if we got it right on the mark or not. Little holes or... Try that. Hey, got it. Right, moment of truth. Oh,
It's a bit bloody low, isn't it?
yeah.
It's just right.
I think that's the difference of the ground level. Mind you, I think this gate was pretty high anyway. Yeah, it's always been pretty high. Does the latch fit? Just.
Is it going down?
Yep, it's going down a little bit. Look at the gap though. Perfect. Righto, so we've adjusted the gates. This one's a little bit off the ground here, but that's to be expected as the track behind us has a bunch of ruts in it. Now that we've leveled all this part out, when we open and shut gates, it will be all good. Now that the GoPro's going flat, I think we're gonna leave it here. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, drop a question in the comments if you want to ask a question. I'm more than happy to help you out, and we'll see you later. Happy farming, people.